Welcome to the Arcane Mystic, your weekly sanctuary for health, well-being and spiritual exploration. Whether you're delving into the healing power of frequency medicines, uncovering hidden wisdom, or seeking a deeper connection on your journey back to self, this podcast is a guide to the mystical side of life. Join us each week as we explore ancient practices, modern techniques, and timeless truths that help you unlock your true potential. We bring together a community of like-minded souls who are passionate about spiritual growth and personal transformation. This podcast is about the soul's journey and the wisdom that lies within. So if you're ready to elevate your mind, body and spirit, subscribe to the Arcane Mystic today. Let's awaken the inner mystic and embark on a journey of discovery together. Remember, the journey to self is the most powerful journey of all. Welcome to this broadcast of the Arcane Mystic. My name's Elena, and today we have the wonderful Maria Wheatley, who is a well-known and respected second-generation master dowser who specialises in dowsing for the Geodetic system of Earth energies, ley lines, and lost civilisations. But for me, there's more to Maria that meets the eye because her work ties in with a lot of different, I would call them sciences. So Maria, lovely to have you on the show. Please tell us a bit about yourself, anything that can help people to understand and know who you are, even though many people already do.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me, Ilona. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening with you. Well, for those that don't know me, for example, I've been exploring Earth energies, ancient sites, lost civilizations for about 30 years. I'm one of the UK's leading experts when it comes to Earth energies, but there's more to me than even that because I really try to tune into the ancestors, whether that's in ancient Egypt or whether that's at Stonehenge. And through tuning in to the ancestors, which all of us can do, tune into anything at any one time, it led me to discover the elongated skulled people of Stonehenge. And then I went on to find them all across the world, in effect. So what I'd like to sort of portray is we are so powerful to be able to tune in to the lost and holy history of the distant past, no matter who we are or where we live.
Amazing. What a way to start. And you know, I've just finished Maria's book. I'm going to show it. I'm going to put it on here anyway. The Secret History of Stonehenge. And this book can be read by somebody that's on their journey, just starting out on their journey. It can be read by the astrologer. It can be read by the rune reader. It could be read by somebody who works with healing energies. It can be read by anybody. There's so much wisdom. The alchemist, those of you that are working with maybe magic or trying to understand the way that things work, it opens your mind. And what I love about the book is that it will touch something within each and every one of us that is in alignment with our soul mission. Now, the book will start with, I've got questions about this because there's just, I want to know so much stuff. But for somebody that knows nothing about earth energies, please can you just give a brief breakdown?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. What are earth energies? What are ley lines? Well, if we think of our own bodies, okay, through the eyes of an acupuncturist, we have meridian lines. For example, if we imagine that Gaia, Mother Earth, is the same, she has these meridian lines. And we could call them lays and grid lines, for example, but there's more to her than that. There's places upon the earth that are condensed in power, mainly through the earth's inner waters, because there's one type of water, the holiest of holies, which is yin water that's born within the womb of the earth, independent of rainfall, and that emits a particular energy pattern. And guess what? That's what the ancients were looking for. And they would cite on numerous different types of earth energies to make a power center. A lot of people just think it's ley lines. They carry the energy of the earth energies that are all woven into ancient sites, whether that's the pyramids in Egypt or a stone circle in Ireland.
And healing was done in specific areas in accordance with earth energies. And I
Mm.
found this bit really interesting because we can really, according to your book, and even I've been, I think it was West Kennet Long Barrow that we went to, and we went into one of the smaller rooms there. And whilst we were in there, we made some sounds, and you can feel the energy. It's still there. And it was so overwhelming for me, not in a bad way, but in a good way, that it even brought me to tears. And why, I don't know. But when I got home that evening, I felt refreshed. I felt enthusiastic. I felt so many different wonderful feelings. And that just shows that there's still places that are not really spoken about too much that are waiting for people to visit. So, yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you. So, for example, with the long barrows and ancient sites, sorry for butting in, I'm enthusiastic with your questioning and
go for
ideas.
it.
Uh, what they do, what often they do, and I've noticed this time and time again, and I've been around ancient sites with some really amazing power women and wisdom keepers like Dolores Cannon. They tap us into our soul's divine purpose. So when we go to these ancient sites, they can literally awaken an aspect within us where we kind of knew it was there, but didn't necessarily identify it.
Just made me go cold in a good way. I can feel that frequency again, and it feels like really amazing. And the other thing as well that they would have had in those periods of time in those communities was like a witch doctor's healing house. And I found that part in your book really fascinating because they were, again, all over the world.
Absolutely, and they were at Stonehenge. For example, there were timber constructs that had a standing stone inside of them. This is little spoken about. It was first discovered at the turn of the last century by Colonel Hawley, and later was reinvestigated by Professor Mike Parker Pearson of University College London, or UCL, as it's known for short. And they realized that there was these timber structures. Well, I know, for example, that those timber structures, as a dowser and a geomancer, was cited above one of the most beautiful earth energy patterns. That's the triple spiral, like you see at Newgrange. Imagine that in the earth. That's why it's carved onto Newgrange. Mother Earth manifests these particular spirals and lines and circles and zigzags, and so this is what they were looking for. And put a stone like an acupuncture needle into a meridian line, it draws the energy up. Yeah, just like you would release with an acupuncture needle, for example, in some cases at least. That's what the stones are. They're needles in stone, tapped into earth energies, bringing that energy up for healing, divination, and numerous different purposes as well. And some we probably haven't even imagined yet. And it's up to audience listeners to look into this, because anyone that thinks any one author has all of the answers, no, they don't. We're just chapters in a book, and there's so much out there to be discovered.
Stones. Let's talk about the stones. And I've been to a few of your talks. I met Maria in 2017 when I was going through, I don't know, I was trying to find people that I could really not work with, but just be around that understood their way of doing things. And I like it when you're around somebody that may be either a really good astrologer, you work with earth energies, you're quite unique in the way that you work. You've got Thomas that works in lots of different ways, but each one of you have got your own signature. And I met you at that time when I was a bit lost, really, really lost. And it made a massive difference because what Maria's work really does, it doesn't tell you what to see. It may tell you, maybe have a look at this, but then something happens within you. So, with regards to the stones, you've spoken about the stones and about how they may be able to transmit messages, or there's the ancients when they built these circular structures, or for instance, Stonehenge, these megalithic sites, there may have been a way that they were imparting knowledge.
Exactly. Again, when we look at a stone circle, one of our fundamental question is, why a circular shape? Yes, it's got symbolic reasons. It never ends. It's forever going. It represents eternity. But also we have these earth energy circular patterns in the ground. They're called primary halos in boring dowsing terminology. But there are circles of power that are in the ground. And when ancient man and women were programming the stones. What do I mean about programming the stones? A master dowser way back in the 1960s and 70s, who was a Cambridge lecturer actually and a scientist, he started to look in what if you as you're programming a stone, meaning tapping it into shape like this, and imagine all of those stones at Stonehenge, numerous ones at Avebury, they've slightly been sculptured, the ones at Stonehenge, definitely into a lozenge shape, and you're pushing sound into that, or you're pushing a thought form into that, then maybe that can retain that energy. How can it retain energy? It's just a stone, some people may say. But as I've pointed out time and again, there is no difference on the inner lattice structure of a standing stone, wherever, to a semiconductor from Silicon Valley that is man-made. They are exactly the same on a lattice structure level, and they can retain memory and they can pass memory on as well. Any semiconductor can do that. So if we start to visualize the standing stones as these semiconductors, then they can be programmed for sound or for imagery. Now, what we know about places like Stonehenge, if we look back to some of the earliest documentation, and that's called cog almanacs. And a cog almanac, basically in the sort of 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries, people could not read. They weren't educated like we are now, thankfully so. And so a cog almanac would have little symbols like a big sun for the summer solstice, for instance. And it always said at particular times, like the winter solstice and the spring equinox, Apollo, the god of healing and the god of light, arrives at Stonehenge. And then he occupies Stonehenge. And they were talking about him as if he was there, as if he could manifest, for example. Now, Professor Tim DeVille, sadly, he's recently passed. He was a fantastic archaeologist and one of the most open-minded I have ever met, who thought, like myself, Stonehenge was a healing temple. He too said the same thing. It was occupied. They must have realized, the ancients, something they saw that we don't today, because maybe it's been made even more ruinous and it's kind of been deprogrammed. So I do see stones being capable of releasing sound, ultrasound. It's been recorded time and again, and also fleeting images.
That kind of ties in with something that I've been researching, ancient African ancestry.
Hmm.
Now, I did a podcast the other day with Hare and the Hawthorn with Kate and Neil, and we were talking about African fairies. And one that came up was the Aziza. They often existed with the concept of the Igbag Iwase, and these were spirits that inhabited sacred stones that offered counsel to humanity. So they even had that council over there. And I really believe that at one point that all of humanity had a sacred way of working that would have been similar throughout all the different parts of the world. There may have been slight differences or differences in the way that the tribes lived, but there seems to be some kind of ancient knowledge that is found in every ancient dynasty or every ancient civilization that is similar to other places.
Absolutely. I mean, for myself, going around sites worldwide, and I've doused in 16 different countries alone to date. There's always been, when you have a quiet moment and you're at a place, a fleeting eye of something in the background, whether that's an Egyptian statue seeming to blink and be alive and become animated by cosmic forces at particular times of the year, or just that kind of, did I see something? As if, where we've got a glimpse into that ancient window, like you're saying, of stones being occupied. And that's what I think was happening in the distant past. They programmed the stones for whatever reasons, whether it was the same in Africa, something similar over here in Egypt, etc. But they always talked, even Hermes Trismegistus, he talked about statues coming alive, being
Exactly.
animated. Yes, at particular times of the year. Now that you don't keep saying these things unless somebody is experiencing them. And right up to the 17th century in England, they were saying the same thing.
Wow, that's fascinating. I did not know that, but I believe that. I just, yeah, something with that resonates. And the other thing that I found really interesting is that in my own book, The Road to Sovereignty, I asked the question that if many different humans once walked the earth, what happened to them all? And we can see that with the Tasmanian ones. They were there and then they weren't. So, whilst I was reading your book, you speak of two different types of humans here. And you said the first name, the long headed skull people, and also the Cro Magnon man. Could you please give some, like for the viewers today,
Mm.
just a brief breakdown of what they both were? Because the long headed, they were both at Stonehenge, they were both at these ancient sites.
Yes, it's what was literally spoken a few hundred years ago by the early anthropologists, people that studied human beings, really. And what I noticed in my journey was I got drawn to a particular barrow and realized that the person that was buried in this long barrow had a very, very long skull. And I went to Cambridge and numerous other institutes to photograph them to prove them to the world that there had been a hidden history, a secret history that had been long forgotten. So if we imagine that my skull here now is kind of round, but then if we see a skull like this being extended, then that's more of the long skulled personality and person, those that lived in the Neolithic period, which is about 5,500 years ago. So we imagine them with long skulls like this, and their ear placement, you can't see mine, it's beneath my hair at the moment, but it's here. But on a long skulled person, it was placed further back, looking almost, you mentioned faeries earlier, Ilona, to do with stone, and they had this kind of fey look to them that could have been quite mythical looking human beings. So there was this type. And they were born with naturally long skulls, and some of the elites, the kings, the queens, the high priestesses, they use cranial deformation, that's putting boards against a pliable, soft baby skull to extend it even more. But they were born with a naturally long skull. So you had two types of long skulled people in Neolithic Britain that were very long skulled, hyper elongated, as I call them, and the lesser elongated. And it was a kind of status. And we see this in other parts of the world, like Paracas in Peru, that Brian Forster, a colleague of mine who forwarded the book, lectures on worldwide. Then we have a much, and they, incidentally, they were quite short. The femur bones showed the height of a woman to be about 4'9", men to be 5'9" tops. That would be very, very unusual. They were average about 5'4". So we can imagine them to be very ethereal looking and very fairy looking, like different. You do a double take if you saw one today. And then, round about the time of the Bronze Age, what archaeologists call the Beaker culture of 2500 BC, came across from Europe and up from the peninsula of Spain, for example. And they were much, much taller and they had very round skulls. And they were much fairer skinned than the ancient Neolithic people who had a very dark Mediterranean skin. It's now been ascertained by modern day aDNA, that's ancient DNA testing. And it was these tall people that really took over places like Stonehenge, and they would add to them, but they didn't build them. There's an amazing young expert in aDNA, ancient DNA, called Professor Ian Barnes, and he's looked at numerous different types of DNA, and he came to a staggering conclusion. Incidentally, they don't call them long-skulled and round-skulled like I do. They call them Neolithic and Bronze Age, but the Neolithic were long-skulled. And what Barnes discovered was that these two cultures, around about 2500 BC, never mixed for 500 years. That's like me and you and our children, our children, our children, our children, children, never ever integrate. Then Barnes says there's a tipping point and people started having children together. And the ancient DNA of the long skull got eradicated, possibly through disease on top of that, a bit like when the Spanish went to South America. Common cold, smallpox, different illnesses, certain people and cultures haven't been around, and therefore it can be a killer.
Wow. There's 2 points I want to make with that. The first one is about the deformation of the skull. So the skull deformation. And there's parts in here that says that just by doing that to these children as they were growing, it never harms them or did anything, but what it actually did was gave them more abilities, more awareness to be able to tune into earth energies and maybe things going on around them. Now, again, going back to African culture, there was in Credo Mutwa's book, in Dabba My Children, he speaks about the folklore of the people over there. And what happened was, is that Lumakanda, one of the people, he fell in love with a woman, but he was immortal and his two daughters were immortal and they never let him love anyone. So he thought the only way that I can make this work is if she's also immortal. So he takes this woman and he has two people working on her. And what did they do? They opened her skull and they took a bit out of her skull. And then they inserted a disc within the skull. And when she awoke and had healed from the surgery, they took out a bit of the disc, but they inserted a green crystal, an emerald one. Why I did that, I don't know why they did that. But what he says is that by taking out a part of the skull, what it does is it awakens their extrasensory perceptions. So after she woke up from that operation, he asked her, "How do you feel?" And she was really upset because she said, "I can see the beginning of creation. I can hear everything. I can feel like the story of eternity and see different entities and all the rest of it."
Mm.
Do you think that by doing this to the skulls over this side, that they would have had the same abilities as well?
I think so, because what I noticed in my journey to understand the ancient history of the Long Skull people, time and time again, it was noticed in the earliest of excavations that the skulls had been trepanned. And that's like what you're describing, Ilona. Imagine a circular piece cut out of my skull, and it was thought to enhance one's consciousness. Now, if we go to the late 60s and the 1970s. Now, I don't recommend to do this at home, but there was a lady, she was Amanda Fielding, and what she wanted to do was to trepan her own skull and see what would occur. And she did that. And like I say, I would not recommend anybody doing that. But what she found was a higher consciousness and what she called the heartbeat in the head. Imagine that when you're a child, we're all psychic. Well, most of us are psychic as a child, if we could just go down that golden thread at the moment. And then when our sutures fuse up, as they do around 30, so they're like this to begin with, and things flow better in the brain on both sides of the brain. But as we get older, they fuse. And once they fuse, we kind of dulls down part of our psychic side for some people. And by trepanning the skull, it can release a bit of energy like it was when we were a child to be more receptive. And Fielding went on to do two trepannings on her skull. And also what I noticed about ancient sites, the ancient sites that have hold stones within the long barrows always contained trepanned skulls. And then once they had passed, the person that had the operation, and a lot of them survived, a lot survived, the discs were used as amulets by other people. So they were often seen with a hole drilled in them and in other graves that matched the trepan skull. So they were deemed magical amulets for possibly healing purposes. And also what I noticed in the Parisian area of the Neolithic, so we're going to hop over to France now, is that the priestesshood there, they were long skulled as well. They trepanned their skulls, but also they scarred their skulls by, if you imagine we have a suture coming down here and we have one going across here, a bit like a T shape. We just keep it really simple. And they'd widen it by scarring it there. So it's suddenly a wide parting and you can see it at the back. And what I think they were doing that for is to say that we are part of the priesthood, priestesshood, and maybe at different ceremonies, they'd whiten it with chalk, make it blue with woad, make it red with ochre. So they would stand out from the crowd, so to speak. So I truly believe that they were activating as well their crown chakras. in
Is
particular ways that maybe we would think is very different to how we would activate them here today.
don't you find that fascinating that we're seeing the same kind of story in different parts of the world?
Absolutely. That's why I love doing, podcasts and going on the lecture circuit, because I think, once we start bridging different cultural identities, we find the bare bones of it sometimes. And I hadn't heard that about ancient Africa, actually. That when we look down on it both, they're so, so similar. Even when I was in ancient America, similar things happen that are separated by thousands of miles, because I think humans can really tap into resources from different dimensions.
And you've done well with that, with your dowsing and being a second generational dowser your father taught you. For somebody that's just starting out with dowsing, can you give them any insights as to what wisdom that this could maybe, bestow upon them if they were using, because you do courses on this and you teach people how to do this. How do you feel that they could benefit?
Today, we could benefit in many different ways. And I think one of the most important, which doctors in the 1970s and 80s, and I mean MDs, physicians, not you've got a PhD in butterflies, it was doctors, they would look to where people lived. And if you live above particular types of earth energies that are classified as geopathic stress, meaning toxic earth energy. Now, I'm just going to call it toxic earth energy. We don't need terminology. And then you have a dowsing rod and your own sensitivity allowing you to find these things, then you can be healthy. Because what the doctors discovered was that if you live long term, let's say 3 to 5 to 10 years above toxic earth energy, geopathic stress, it doesn't matter what type of healing that you have. You could have chemotherapy, radiotherapy, acupuncture, whatever, or holistic practice you want, but you go to sleep above that geopathic toxic energy zone, your body doesn't self-heal. That's a fact. So we have underground water that isn't born within the womb of the earth, yang water, that can be toxic, and the doctors really recognize that. And Dr. Manfred Curry discovered what's called the Curry grid. Just imagine like a fishnet all over Gaia of squares, around about 3.5 meters wide. And that particular points on that grid are highly, highly toxic. Some can encourage inflammation, like rheumatism, arthritis, and other parts of that grid can induce cancers or whatever your DNA has it. My family have heart disease, for example. It has to be structurally inside of you. And they looked at this and they realized that if you placed your bed in a particular manner for you and your loved ones and the workspace, where we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of time in our bed sleeping, then we can live in harmony with Gaia and we can be very healthy. A German study alone, and I find this shocking, a German study discovered that a third of all hospital admissions at one point in a study was down to geopathic stress. Now, you take a third out of the NHS, you have a healthy population. So geopathic stress, those toxic earth energies, I teach how to find and how to live in harmony with the earth. And I also go the other way as well and say about the earth energies that are very healing for us. I did some tests recently because I really like to prove what I say. I don't want people to believe in me and go, oh, and just, believe in what I do. And so I was rigged up to what's called the mind mirror. And that's where it's reading both hemispheres of my brain at any one time. And I'm in particular areas to do with megalithic energy. Just imagine standing stones can push out energy. Remember I said they can draw up energy like an acupuncture needle and then push it out. So I'm in one of these zones, let's call them. And my brain instantly spiked into delta. And I wasn't even meditating. I was talking away. So just imagine that they can really calm us down. And I proved that through the mind mirror with one of the world's experts in America. And when I've measured these frequencies as well, coming out of the earth, like I was describing earlier, they can put your brain into alpha. Delta is really good and theta, for example, but even being calm in alpha. This is what ancient sites can do with us. But many of your listeners would say, but Maria, I don't live like you next to Avebury Henge. In our own back gardens, we're not going to find massive earth currents like at Avebury, male and female earth currents. But I'll tell you what we are going to find, lesser ones. And those lesser ones we can still tap into. If there's a female current in our garden or backyard, then what we can tap into once we find that is meditating. It will increase our intuition, our sensitivity. It will relax us and calm us down. Not necessarily a good place to work, because I'm going to be really chilled out, but a really good place to go to meditate. So by understanding a few different types of earth energies, you can decode your house. And we can look at that to say, okay, I can live in harmony with Gaia. That's what I want people to do, because we have natural healing medicine in the earth. And once we make that relationship with Gaia's earth energies, a beautiful thing happens, Ilona, and this is how I teach people to connect. If you connect to one part of the female earth energy system, for example, you connect to the whole. Okay. So if we can then say, I'm going to tap into, I've got a female earth current in my back garden, for example. When I tap into that, when I need that calm, and we all get flustered, we all get stressed, you know, and I am no exception to the rule of that, but I know where to go. And then if I need even more deeper earth energy healing, I know where to go. I know what to find. So for me, earth energies, yes, it's about sacred sites. That's what I do. That's where I come from. But also, how do we work with the land upon which we live and learn from the earth to be aware of these energies and to pass that wisdom on? I mean, for example, when my daughter Raven was growing up, she's 28 now, and all the mums used to say, my baby doesn't stop crying. They'd be on the curry net that I described earlier. And I used to say to them, move it by about 50 centimeters. Either way, I don't know at this time which way it goes, left or right. Just move the cot, please, just give it a go. And they moved it. And then they said, you've changed my life, Maria. One simple thing like that. Children that are disruptive in class, Dr. Kathy Batchelor proved beyond any doubt that those disruptive children, or children that can't retain memory for long, and we know some children like that, they're on that toxic grid. Move the desk. Just move the desk. And these aren't expensive things that we need to say to add to our education system. I had the good fortune of teaching some nurses from America. Cheryl, I won't say the surname, but God love her. She went back and she took that wisdom. She was already into Reiki and very switched on before she even met me for dowsing. I must add that in. It was like just another bow to her wonderful talents. She moved some of the hospital beds off the curry grid. People started to heal faster. So I see earth energies. Yes, I come from ancient civilizations, but I see them being applied to a modern generation.
Could you imagine if everybody started to do that now, to really connect to the yin lines in their home? And it's the small things that many of us do that can change the world, you know? And the other thing as well is I do bioresonance scan, and 80% of my scans come up with geopathic stress. It comes up on there. The other thing that I mention, I've lived in quite a lot of places. They call me the littlest hobo. And thing is with this, I've lived in some houses where spiritually I have been off the charts. It's been amazing. But I've also lived in houses where it's been absolutely horrendous. And you know, when you get in that house, you know that it's not right and you know you need to get out. You can't stay there. And that happened in the lockdown and I couldn't move. But I know now, I can resonate that that was probably on some yang energy. And just by, like, with what Maria's just shared, this dowsing could be learnt by people within the healing profession, astronomers that are maybe working with astrocartography, or astrologers, should I say, people that are working with runes. It doesn't matter what kind of healing modality that you're working in. This is wisdom that you can integrate into your practice and then maybe help others to do it as well. And who better to learn from than a master dowser? So that comes there with that. And then the other thing, you spoke about priests and priestesses in Stonehenge, and have started to really, because England really doesn't have loads of history that people document, but this book has just proven otherwise, that there was actually people that were here that were able to do things that shamans were doing all over the world. Because I find that so many people go out to South America or they go to all these different places, but there's so much untouched wisdom right here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've really hit the nail on the head with that. We tend to go to near and far, mainly far. But when we look at how the ancient priesthood was working with not just earth energies, with divination, with healing, we start to see that they were very good wisdom keepers. And we know that they were very good at healing because when you look to the people that were placed in the Bronze Age round barrows that were, buried therein, they showed signs of healing. For example, like of knee injuries, and that was focused around Stonehenge. And I think they were really tapping into that. And even in the 12th century, when you had a chronicler called Geoffrey of Monmouth, it was Geoffrey of Monmouth that said about Stonehenge in the 12th century, no stone at Stonehenge doth not have healing power. And right up until the 19th century, for example, people were buying hammers from the local town of Amesbury and knocking off chips of sarsen and bluestone because they believed it to have healing power. So I think the ancient priesthood were, some of them were shamanic, some of them were of the priesthood, but I know that by the artifacts they were buried with, that there was two different types and they wore different clothing. They were buried in different ways, for example. So each one was doing a different thing at places like Stonehenge. And I really do think it was focusing on the transformation of consciousness as well as the transformation of health within that confined area of Stonehenge. And it's got the biggest Bronze Age round barrow cemetery around it of up to 800 barrows encircle Stonehenge. And by looking into those barrows, I realized that shaman were buried in certain parts of that 800 circular round barrows, and the priestesshood was buried in other parts. And it annoys me, and I know it annoys Thomas Sheridan as well, when we see our ancient ancestors portrayed as being, scruffy hair, wearing animal skins, and really looking like something out of the caveman era. And that's just not true. They had more finely woven clothes per centimeter than we do today. And we know that because of a Bronze Age manufacturing fabric location at Must Farm in Cambridgeshire that survived. And they were wearing fabrics like silk, for example. So we know that they were wearing very fine clothes, especially the priestess hood, and that's indisputable. So when I take people around to Silbury Hill and they're showing me people with baskets carrying dirt around to make sophisticated monuments, it really does, annoy me. I would love to one day just clip another board on there saying that the truth of what our ancestors were like and how they actually wore beautiful clothes and had fine staffs and wands, better quality than we have here today in our shamanic communities.
Absolutely. And that is, and I saw some of the materials that they were using in the book, and they were all of high vibration because humans have one frequency, and most of the clothes that people wear today are on the frequency of sickness. But the clothes that they were wearing, like the linens and the nettle, they're of frequencies of healing and also of just high vibration, being able to really connect with the earth energies around you. So, were they really primitive, or is that something that we've been made to believe? Especially with the stuff that they can do.
Exactly, I agree. I mean, they were far, far from primitive. They were excellent astronomers. For example, some of you listening may have experienced high tension over the last full moon, or not being able to sleep, or feeling a little bit irritable, or whatever. That's because the moon in its cycle, especially the 15th, just a few days ago, was at its most northerly. That means in the cycle of the moon over 18.61 years, it can't get any higher in the sky. It's in its most northerly position in the sky. And we had that on Sunday. We're going to have some more cycles of that coming next year, including a really powerful feminine day. And so when we're not used to working with these energies, and I know about that cycles because I discovered some of the alignments at Avebury 18.61 years ago. And I had the pleasure of working with people, women that had worked with the previous 18.61 cycle, such as Margaret Curtis of Callanee Stone Circle fame. And that's a time, even now, where we can tap into what were we doing 18.61 years ago? Do we want to end particular cycles? Do we want to build another cycle in our life, for example? Now is the time to tap into our future to see where our future timelines are going, because the moon is literally beaming her light rays down onto us, and it can make us feel a little bit jarred and a little bit wobbly, for example. But once we tap into that, it's got such great potential to change our lives for the next, well, near enough 19 years ahead.
And this is what working with earth energies can do on a physical, emotional, you know, mental and spiritual level. They're life changing. And the other bit in your book that I loved was about wood henge for the seeker, for those that are searching for, their purpose in life. Can you maybe, for somebody that feels a bit lost and they don't know where they're going or what they're doing, what could they do at Woodhenge?
Well, Woodhenge is amazing. It's an integral part of Stonehenge that is widely overlooked, and it's free. Stonehenge is expensive to go into, unfortunately. Woodhenge is free. And it contains it did contain six concentric circles of timber poles. So just imagine concentric circle, another circle, and there were six of them. And what I noticed when I people watch at ancient sites is that most people just walk straight to the center, have a look around, take a few photographs, go scrolling on their phone, that mindless scrolling that some people even do at sacred sites, God forbid them, and then they leave. And then I realized that through decoding ancient sites, if you walk Woodhenge in the form of a labyrinth, you touch every single stone. You interact with every single aspect of that monument. And labyrinth walking, and it's really simple to do, labyrinth walking can take us from the outside of myself to my inside, to my soul's divine purpose, because we're meandering like a serpent. And we're doing this in effect. We're doing that 2.5 times at Woodhenge, and it just really can change us. That's why you have a labyrinth at Chartres Cathedral. That's why you have labyrinths all over Crete, for example, the Hopi Indian. And to the Hopi Indians, for example, I love Four Corners. I take tours to Charco Canyon, quite close to Hopi Reservation. They say it puts us in touch with Mother Earth. More importantly, it puts us in touch with ourselves. So by labyrinth walking, we can get in touch with our soul's divine purpose. And what some people get frustrated by in life, and I truly understand it, is they don't know what they should be doing. What should I be doing? I feel I should be doing something, but I don't know what it is. And this is where ancient sites, with their power and with their wisdom, can awaken the soul. That's all it does, a gentle stimulation that really kind of works something up to our consciousness, where suddenly we think, ah, that's what I should be doing with my life. And then life changes.
And again, with this part, you started off with dowsing, and I don't know what your chronology is of how you've worked with things, but we've also got astrology within your work. We've got runes within your work as well. I saw the alchemy side of it that sits there because you mentioned the three books of occult philosophy, of philosophy by Henry Agrippa. That book is absolutely fascinating. I love the way that you brought the magic squares into that, because so many people go wild when, the planets are retrograde within the sky and things are moving backwards and they're a bit of a nightmare. But in this book, it teaches you how you can work with magic squares within your own home.
Absolutely. I mean, for example, in more modern times, Mercury retrograde has come to mean, for example, bad communications, things aren't going to work out, or bury your head in the sand. You may as well don't get out of bed. Uh, in past times, incidentally, it didn't necessarily mean that. To more kind of medieval alchemists, it would mean a time to be a little bit more still, not to do anything, because in the heavens above, what is really going on with Mercury? It's creating this beautiful trifold in the heavens, and it loops back as it goes retrograde, and that's where Hermes Tris Trice Magistus gets his name from, because it's doing three beautiful loops. It's a beautiful pattern, for example, that's drawn in sacred geometry. And so when the Cornelius Agrippa came to the British shores with these beautiful books on ancient wisdom, he realized that these squares, and a magic square is quite magical because each number adds up to the same bit, and there's got lots of numbers in these little squares, if you imagine, and just by putting particular symbols on top can kind of dissipate the energy. So if you have Mercury retrograde, then all you do is put a symbol on top of the magic square and it dissipates it. And this has been known for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. It's not something around the corner. But we must remember, modern day astrologers do change things. I love history. You probably get that, Ilona. I love history, and I love the history of astrology. And when I look back to what did houses mean in the 14th century, for example, or the 15th century, they meant different things. The full moon to the Victorians, you lunatic, you're going to go nuts, you're going to get emotional. High emotional time from the Victorian era that was written into astrology. In the 16th century, it meant the time to travel by day and by night because you could see the road ahead. So they saw that as a time to travel in mind and in body. You see, so I think astrology has changed over the years, but nonetheless, if we look back to the wisdom of people like Cornelius Agrippa that could translate particular manuscripts, and they give us a magical formula to help us grow. If you need more finances, work with the Saturn square. For example, that's what a lot of people do. Do you know what? One of my favorite house healings, because I do house healing as well, as you probably know, Ilona, was I'm not going to name names, was in Wales. I was going to say North Wales, for example, and they invited me into the house. It was a very large hall. Yeah, the house. It was a hall in North Wales, and they said it had a strange occupant, the last person that lived there. So I'm kind of going around thinking, well, I was just saying to the people, that room's very strange. That room is very, very strange, and they're the ones I'm going to heal. They're the ones I'm going to start to clear of the residue energy of the past. And they informed me that it used to be a brothel. Yeah, it
Oh,
was a yeah, it used to be used to be. But this gypsy woman apparently made a fortune. She ended up with a hall, yeah. And they said to me, there's a really weird symbol out the front. Can you just do something? Can you disengage it? Can you do something against this? And I looked at it and said, she was no gypsy witch. She was a top magician. That's the magic square of money. That's the magic square of being able to earn. And I said to them, if you take that out, when you want to turn this into an Airbnb, that was a plan kind of to do a very large Airbnb. I said, I would personally, I would leave it there. So, even kind of in this practical, I wouldn't, say, go out there and do that. But it was just showing that, some people can change their lives, be born with next to nothing, and the next minute they're in the hall, like living it like a laird.
and with those symbols, I mean, that's a great story. Always know what you're doing when you're doing any kind of ancient alchemical practices, know how to clear the energy, know how to open and close things. So really, it's not just know what you're doing. And this is why it's good,
Absolutely.
to really look things up around that. And all of the different correspondences are also in Maria's book. And can you do me a favor, please, Maria? I keep seeing this all over the place. And people are going wild and crazy. Oh, 666 is of the devil. Please, can you just debunk the number 666?
Yes, I mean all of the kind of numbers like 777, 333, 111, they all mean something to the ancients in different cultures across time. They have meant things. So, for example, when we come to the square of the sun, it's called 6 times 6 magic. And it has 6 boxes going that way, six down. You get the picture. 36 all in all, 6 times 6. And that's why it's 6 times 6 magic. Now, if you add up all the numbers going along the top or diagonally like this in the magic square, they will come to 111. You add them all up, every single one, add up, add up, add up, to get a total of the entire magic square. That comes to 666. But it's seen as a kind of tyrant number, not necessarily the anti-Christ as it became Christianized too. For example, 777 is the number of perfection, the number of extending yourself to some regard. So I see these numbers as being added on in modern times, just like the Victorians added on the emotional side of the moon and changed the houses, what the houses meant. They have been changed over the years as well. So what I always think, and you've got a lot of love and wisdom inside of you by saying, don't just dabble, know what you're doing. You're very, very wise yourself. And I think, if we have a little bit of knowledge behind us and a good intent and a really kind of positive intent, where you're going to do no harm and you're just going to be advancing your consciousness, then, the earth energies are on your side. And the other thing about ancient sites is they tend to, 9 out of 10, don't give you something that is going to be an overload you know
Uh,
that's very, very, very rare. So even if you go to an ancient site and you're all upset, believe me, I've done it a million and one times, I'm a good teacher in that regard, and you go to somewhere and some people say, oh, you shouldn't go in with that energy, oh no, you should do. Well, there are places in stone circles that can clear us energetically. Yeah.
mm,
And
mm,
what I got taught, I mean, I've been taught by master dowsers worldwide. I've been so fortunate and blessed. And I got taught a particular thing by the um, Italian dowsers, master dowser. And they said when the bishop comes to a church in northern Italy, he has to stand in a particular area that they unromantically called the neutral zone. That's what they unromantically called it. So the bishop would stand in the neutral zone and the earth energies there would clear him so that when he goes into the sacred space, he's not taking his emotional baggage with him, making him more receptive. Okay, so they asked me to find it. I found it. Then I thought, well, it can't just be churches in northern Italy that have this. I wonder if Luxor has it. I wonder if Avebury has it. I wonder if ancient sites worldwide have it. And I kept finding these clearing zones. So what I suggest to people is just, go to a clearing zone. They're easy to find places. People get drawn to them quite naturally, even if you don't know where to go, and just be still and then allow the earth energy to come up and to clear you and then go into a space and a little bit more balance. And even if you can't do that, and when I didn't know about that, I just used to go into an ancient site, as you probably know yourself, Alona, and find that space by myself and for myself. And just like my brain being put into Delta, yours will be too. And there be that moment of healing, that moment of calm. And what I love about this is what our ancestors have left all of us. They've left us their legacy, their healing legacy, and their mind expanding legacy for us here today.
thank you so much for that. And we're going to end this soon. The last thing, and that I want to go into just lightly, is the fact that, no, there's two things. Number one, do you think that DC energy, because you said that this enhances plant growth, do you think that AC energy hinders plant growth?
What I really do feel is that if we experiment with different types of earth energies, as I have done, by charging seeds on particular types of earth energy, and we recorded AC and DC frequencies and other frequencies beside, then you can charge a seed and it will grow, as I proved, twice as straight, twice as fast. Yeah. So what I think is I've been mentioning our homes for healing, for example, sacred sites for healing. Well, I've also looked into how we can grow in harmony with the earth as well. And I hate the idea of pesticides. I know all your listeners are probably nodding away and thinking, oh, yeah, I'm on your page, Maria, and I'm on your page, because I don't want to eat that. I don't want my children's children to eat that. And so I'm trying to look into different ways of developing and working with earth energies to grow foodstuffs upon, because in my trials, it's been found that it does work. And I'm really thrilled that I've got some land in England and some land in America to take this to the next level, to really try to, show the world that you can grow your food and you don't need pesticides, fertilizers. And this is a fact, and this is a true fact, and it came from an experimental archaeological farm on the south coast that I corresponded with. And I was told that the Bronze Age, especially the late Bronze Age, their yield per acre, meaning their harvest per acre, okay, could not be beaten until the advent of fertilizers in the 1950s. Now, that's a fact, okay? That's because, in my humble opinion, and from my heart space and my mind, I know that they were growing in harmony with earth energies. And they knew the earth probably better than I ever will. Yeah, with no pollution, no electromagnetic smog, no mindless scrolling. They were in constant harmony. So I think we have much to learn from the ancients to apply, like I said earlier, to a modern generation.
Maria in her books talks about seeds, about how they were put ancient sites. She goes into great detail about that and about how the yields were different. And it's certainly something that I would be reading from an agricultural perspective, but also from a perspective of just being a person that's at home that wants to learn how to grow and how to work with this. So that part of it's absolutely great. So Maria, where can people find you? Where can they find your courses? Where can they find your books? And I don't say book, I say books because Maria has written a lot of different books as well. So where can they find all your information?
Yes, I've got two websites. I do tours around the world, for example, and tours to Stonehenge, Avebury. I do a professional dowsing weekend course at Avebury. And you can find out all that information at the Avebury, that's Avebury, the Avebury Experience.co.uk. And my teaching platform is esotericcollege.com. And all of my courses, it's optional, can be taken to diploma level because my college is fully affiliated to the Association of Distant Learning Colleges UK.
Amazing. And your books are on the websites as well.
Yes, and you just go to the shop on the aveburyexperience.co.uk and you will find all of my books, dowsing rods and pendulums as well. And I always love teaching dowsing at Avebury. It's the world's largest stone circle and it's a university of earth energies there. And we always have some fun as well, going to the ancient sites. What's not to like?
People that go to Maria's courses and days out are absolutely amazing. Their wisdom's in their own way. And it's also a great place for people to come and meet new members of a tribe if they feel a bit alone on the journey or they don't really feel that they resonate with the outside world. I really recommend you come to one of these because you will find somebody or many that you will resonate with and you can share your wisdom in a really, really safe and sacred space. So that's
Thank you.
amazing. And lastly, any advice that you want to give to people on this equinox, winter solstice, should I say, sorry, on the winter solstice?
Yes, I mean, just a little kind of gem. I've had so many different winter solstices at so many different sites, and it doesn't matter where you are or who you're with. It's a time when it's a new beginning. The light is growing lighter each day after the winter solstice. So what I like to do is I like to just be a little bit reflective and think back into the last year and take the gems with me, and those things that made me a little bit fearful, made me a little bit sad, maybe a little bit angry. I leave them behind like in the dark, and I step into the light of a new year, into the light of a new time. So it's like kind of going from the old into the new, and taking that beautiful light with us, that the sun is now at its solstice, at its standstill, and then it's going to get higher in the sky and the days get longer. And we can be like that as well by planting a new seed for the year ahead.
Oh, I love that. Love that bit of wisdom. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Maria. It's been an absolute honor to have you on here. And I'm going to say it again. I've only just touched the surface of some of the things that are in this book. So to add to your collection, whatever way that you're working with things, it's an absolute great find. And happy solstice to you all, sending you all love. And from this side of the Arcane Mystic, I will see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you.